Alright, well, I've been thinking about ideas for videos because we're going to kind of be in a lull here for a little while. The thing that was supposed to be happening this weekend due to logistical issues isn't going to happen until next weekend, so there's that. But anyway, I realized that everybody's seen a lot of these combines, but I've never actually talked about them as far as like how I ended up with them. So I figured today would be a good time to talk about the combines and the other harvest stuff that I got. So probably got to start with what is technically my first combine, which is stuffed back here in the corner, which some of you've seen, some of you haven't, but I haven't really said a damn thing about it or really walked around it. And to tell you the truth, I can't even remember the last time I got a good look at it. So this is actually my first combine. It's a Model 18 pull type. I bought this when I was probably 13 or 14 maybe. Yeah, it's probably about right. It sat in the fence row at my uncle's forever, over where that 545's at, and I always thought it was his, and turns out it wasn't. It belonged to another guy that my uncle's friends with. I gotta figure out in her, I gotta get back in here. Ooh, that's a spider web. I'm not going through that. Not going through that. I'm not scared of spiders, but still not going through that. So anyway, I finally tracked down who it belonged to, because my uncle was actually the last one to use it. And then he got done with it, and instead of returning it, it got stuffed in his fence row with all the clean outdoors closed and, you know, everything that you would normally do to take care of a combine not done. And it basically just rusted out. It was a really nice, all original, fully functioning machine up to that point. So it'd been sitting in that fence row for as long as I could remember, ever since I was a little kid. And I've always had my eye on it because pull type combines I just always thought were cool. And so I finally tracked down who it belonged to and asked if he wanted to sell it. He said sure, because he's never going to do anything with it. So I ended up buying it for $100 and went over and drug it home with my 66. And it's all, like I say, it's rusted out. There was no bottom left in the head. It was gone. All the cross auger tubes in it, or cross auger troughs in the bottom, are rusted out. I mean, there's just rust everywhere in the bottom of this thing. So I started tackling the head, and you can see how far that got. I got the head done. I made new reel bats for it. The reel actually needs more. I made new bearing blocks, but the reel, the reel arms need replaced, and there's more work to be done to it. But at the time, I didn't have a whole lot of money to throw at it, and I wasn't necessarily as skilled as I am now with the fabrication and whatnot. So basically I worked on it till I ran out of time and money, and this was all the further it got. And I really need to get back on it one of these days, because it'd be cool as hell. It'd look really good behind the 1600. I mean, I don't think it needs sheet metal work. Other than that, well, it needs sheet metal work. Probably damn near every bearing in the thing is gonna need replaced. It's gonna need every belt on it. The, well, son of a bitch, get down there. The bottom of the grain tank is gone. The bottom of the unload elevator is gone. And by gone, I mean it's not like it's got rust holes in it. I mean it is physically gone. The unload auger's hanging on there by a wing and a prayer. It's going to need probably a bunch of wood inside. Basically what it comes down to is I need a shop where I could put this thing in the corner and just start tearing it apart. And as things progress, I can throw money at it when I got money and time, and when I don't, I can just drop everything and walk away from it and not have to worry about stuffing it back in a barn to get it out of the way. That's the kind of project this is it requires a spot where I can actually park it and work on it, which currently I do not have. But yeah, you can see that that's not good. And the woodchucks right now aren't doing it any favors. They got a real nice mound built underneath it. And it's actually the last year for the Model 18, which I can't remember. Can't remember if that was 62. The Cockshut buyout happened in 62, or was it 63? The Cockshut buyout happened in 62 or 63. They moved Battle Creek production to the Brantford plant. They built the Model 18 in the Brantford plant for 1 year before they discontinued it, if I remembered right, which would make this a 60. I looked it up before. It's either I want to say it's a 63 or a 64. I want to say either way, it's a last year Model 18 built. So it would actually be the right vintage for behind the 1600 too, which would be kind of neat. That'd be the perfect tractor for in front of this. Although I've got a advertising brochure for a Model 18 that shows it behind a 550, and a 550 would have plenty of horsepower, but I pulled this thing home with my 66, and this thing's so dang heavy that it threw that little tractor around like a rag doll. So I couldn't imagine. I mean, if you're going to pull it behind a 550, you better have some flat ground. I really want to get back there. And this is the other cool thing about it, is it was originally sold out of Ted Wiggins in Niles, Michigan, which Dad knew Ted, and I knew Ted's son, and he actually gave me a brand new Ted Wiggins dealer, this same sticker. He had a bunch of them at his house. He gave me a brand new one. So when I go through this thing and get it done, it's gonna get all repainted, obviously, and I'll have a brand new Ted Wiggins dealer sticker to put on it, which will be kind of neat. Try to get, I don't know if I'm gonna fit, but you can see right there the bottom of the unload auger. It's not there. So one of these days, like I say, I really want to get back on this project, because this thing would be cool as hell. So there's that. And then after that showed up, I want to say I only had that for a year, so maybe I bought that when I was 15. And then the 525 showed up, and the 525 I bought when I was 16. I actually bought this when it would have been the summer after they had the Oliver Winter Show in Auburn, Indiana. And and I actually found out about it while we were down there at the show. We were talking to some friends of ours down there, and I had mentioned, or I knew one of them used to have 2 Oller Model 40 combines. And I asked him about them while I was down there because I was looking for a combine to cut beans with. And he said no, he didn't still have them. He had scrapped them a long time ago. But the other guy we were talking to said, does a Model 525 combine sound right? And I said, yeah, that was their one in the next series after the 40. That was the baby. He says, I'm pretty sure my neighbor has one sitting in a barn. And I said, really? I wouldn't mind having a 525. And so he said, I'll see what I can do to get a hold of him and get you in touch with him. And he did, and sure enough, he still had this thing. And he was done farming, so he was trying to get rid of stuff. Went over and looked at it, and it was in really nice shape. And ended up buying this. The combine and the table I gave $900 for. Bought it one weekend. The next weekend we went over and got it running because it hadn't been running in years. And it actually started really easy. Basically, I cleaned the plugs up, checked the points, and we cranked it a little bit and couldn't get it to pick up prime, so we dumped a little gas down the carburetor and the thing fired right up and ran. He drove it out of the barn, variable speed worked, the whole 9 yards. It actually ran really good. And got it outside. The next day, Dad and I went over there early in the morning to bring it home. Made it like a half-mile down the road, and apparently the lift pump or the mechanical lift pump on the motor went out years ago, and somebody down here by the fuel tank had put a old AC Delco rotary, well, it wasn't even rotary, it was like, you looked at it, it was a crank housing and a piston and a little electric motor, but it was an old AC Delco electric fuel pump, and it was huge. But the way they had it on there, the thing looked factory. Well, that thing had gummed up and quit working, and it wasn't getting any fuel. So once we got it traced down to that, actually take that back, that was the second thing that happened. The first thing that happened was we made it 100 yards down the road, and the carburetor gummed up and it quit getting fuel to the car, or through the carb. So we limped it back to the farm, pulled the carb off, got a carb kit, rebuilt the carb, brought that back, put the carb back on, got it running, made it a quarter mile down the road and around the corner. Then the fuel pump went out. At that point we were stuck along the road, it wouldn't move no nothing. Well, we traced the fuel lines up, found out it had a mechanical lift pump, and just to try to limp it home, basically we bypassed that electric pump, unhooked it, and just put a rubber fuel hose in line around it. And apparently the mechanical lift pump still works, and it pulled fuel enough to get it drove home with no further incident, other than it was running a little warm because the radiator was plugged. But I never had to stop to let it cool down. I just kept an eye on it. It was running right up at the top end of work, but it never overheated. So got that home, and that first year we had it, replaced a bunch of bearings that we found were bad, put almost every belt on it, had the radiator boiled and pressure checked, and it was fine. Went through the hydraulic pump, went through the hydraulic valves, rebuilt the variable speed for the first time. What else? That might have been, we spent probably a better part of a month working on this thing on and off when we had time, and got it going. ran it that first harvest, and found out the cylinder bars were junk. Thing wouldn't hardly feed. So I found a brand new set of cylinder bars in a combine at a junkyard, and by brand new I mean somebody must have put them in there and then decided to quit running the combine because they still had grease paint on them with the part number. So they were literally brand new RAS bars. So it's got brand new RAS bars in it. Did a cut basically every year. I pick a different thing on it to work on to bring it back up to snuff. This year is obviously the Walker bearings and all that stuff. And then the year after I bought it, went back and bought the 2-row 522 Cornhead, which is the 2-row wide, which according to the guy that I bought it from, that was the combine that that was the head that he originally got with the combine. Which would make sense because that head actually says white on it. It doesn't say Oliver, and that's a 68, so it would have been one of the last ones built, or toward one of the last ones built. Ran that for 2 years, and then we switched, when I was farming with my friends, we switched to narrow rows. So I went back, and for another $100, bought a 531 3-row narrow. And ran that for, I ran this for 1 or 2 seasons, and then the feeder house chain broke, so I need to get a feeder house chain for it. But after that, I had been in college and didn't have enough time to help my friends as much as I should, so I went back on my own. And when I did, I switched back to wide rows, so I started running the 2-row head again. And basically, I ran that up until I bought the 7300. Which, I'm pretty sure I bought the 7300. When did I buy that? I think I've had that for 6 or 7 years now. Pretty sure it's been 6 years. I think. Has to be. But anyway, bought the 7300. I wasn't actually looking for another combine. It kind of fell in my lap. Nick, they had to move Max into a home because he was having health issues. And they were trying to get rid of some of the equipment. So Nick, knowing that we had a bunch of Oliver stuff, came and asked me if I wanted it. And I had actually wanted it for a while, ever since I found out it was out there, and ever since I found out it was a diesel. So I said yeah. Ended up giving $2,100 for the combine, the 4-row narrow head, and the 13-foot rigid head. Which was all he had. I bought the whole package, which I didn't think, I don't know, $2,100 probably kind of steep at the time, but it was a green diesel, which they only made the 7300 in an Oliver in 1972, and in 73 they went to white, and they never made another green one, because the 7300 was actually the first one to be sold as a white. And so it's kind of rare in the fact that it's a green 7300. I'm not saying you can't find them, but they're not nearly as easy to find as a white 7300 is. And then throw into that it's a diesel, and it's actually a really rare combine. I've only ever actually heard of one other one. It's supposedly over in Ohio, but I've never actually seen it or found anybody that can confirm it. So it's actually, anybody I've talked to is the only green diesel that anybody's ever seen. Not gonna say there's not more out there, but if they are, they're hiding. So that's how the 7300 showed up. It's kind of had the same treatment as the 525. I've gone through every year and just pick something different to work on, trying to bring it back up to snuff. That's been, the 7300's been taken real good care of. Not going to call it low acre, but it's definitely, just by the wear on it, lower acre than the 525. The 525 was taken care of, but she's covered a lot of ground in her time. You can tell just by the way everything is on it. I mean, she wasn't beat, but she was definitely used. The 7300 was well taken care of, and I think at his height, Max was only farming like 400 acres, and he split it, and he ran corn. He did the same, basically the same thing I did. He ran corn with the 7300, and he had a 525 set up with a robot header control and a chopper, and that's what he cut beans with. So at most, it ever only shelled like 200 acres of corn a year, roughly. So, and Max bought it. The story I got was he bought it when it was a year old. Somebody had bought it and traded it in. So for all intents and purposes, it's a two-owner machine. Max had it, and then I got it. So it's kind of neat to be able to trace the story back that far, because there's not a lot of combines you can do that to, because they tended to bounce around a lot more than tractors did, or just got scrapped. And this one got sold brand new out of HFS Tractor in Baroda, which they just closed up last year. They were Oliver, or they were technically Moline. They were never technically Oliver, but they were Moline, and then they became White. And they had a spattering of Oliver stuff in there, but like I say, technically they were never actually Oliver. They were Moline, and then they became White. And when they became White, they had to cover all the lines, so that was basically what happened. But the building's still there, and they still got the White Farm Equipment sign out on front, or two of them actually, so that's kind of neat. I'd like to buy the signs, but they collect memorabilia and stuff, so even though they sold the dealer, chances are getting the signage and stuff probably not going to happen. So that's two of the combines. And then while I'm here, I got to cover the 74H mounted picker. That the 525 actually led to buying. We had gone over to get, because that 3-row 531 head was actually still on a combine parked in his pasture, or parked in the guy's pasture, and we took, my buddies and I hauled a forklift over there and got the head unhooked and got the forklift pulled away and got the head brought out to the road so that I can take the combine over there and get it. Well, I don't know what made me do it that day, but we had got done, and I decided to take a different road home than the way we went. And it must have been fate. Turned down this road, and I wasn't even going that fast. We were just putzing along, checking everything out, and sitting out in the guy's front yard was this husking bed. And I didn't pay much attention to it at first because I didn't realize what it was, and I didn't really slow down or nothing, but out of the corner of my eye, I happened to see this 74H sticker. And at the time, I didn't even notice that it said 74H. I just noticed that it was white script on a black background, and I'm like, well, you know, that looked an awful lot like an Oliver decal. So I had the 1 ton and the gooseneck in this forklift, and I laid on the brakes, and we backed. I probably was 100 yards past before I realized what it was, so backed all the way back down the road to this guy's front yard, and his wife was home, and I asked her what was going on with it. She says, well, I don't know. I don't really know much about it. I'll have to talk to my husband. He'll be back in a little while. So we went home, got everything unloaded, dropped the trailer, got the truck put away, got in my pickup, and we came back when her husband was home and got to talk to him. And he had literally just got this thing out of the barn and put it in the front yard like a couple, 2 or 3 hours before we drove by. So if I'd have drove by on the way to get the head, it would have never been there. And I asked him what was going on. He says, well, we used to ear pick everything. Well, they had a white 7300, which, come to find out, is ironically the one that I just ended up buying and selling. But they had switched to combine and everything. He didn't use the picker anymore. He wanted the barn space, so he decided to get rid of it. And at that point, he hadn't drug out the row units or anything yet. It was just the husking bed sitting there. And I said, well, I'd be interested in it. How much you want for it? And he says, well, I know they're not really worth much. Will you give me $100 for it? And I don't even think he's got the full $100 out. And I said, sold. So he said, well, it's going to take me a little bit to get the row units out of the barn because I don't really have anything big enough to pick them up. I got to kind of drag them. So I said, that's all right. I'm not in any hurry. Whenever you get to them, he says, well, come back next weekend. We'll get her loaded up. So the next weekend, I went back. He had everything out and took my buddy's trailer, our Clark forklift, and our gooseneck, and ended up loading it on 2 trailers to get it hauled home. But that's the husking bed, the elevator, the subframe that hangs on the tractor, the row units, the snout, or the center snout, and all the brackets and stuff that hold the row units together. So I got that whole thing for $100, and I mean, it's got a couple issues. It's definitely been used, but I'd give this picker a solid 9 out of 10. It is in amazing shape. And I kind of felt bad because it is in such good shape, so I ended up going back and I gave him another $200. I tried to give him more and he wouldn't take it. So it's probably one of the first times ever where somebody came back another week later and gave you more money. But so yeah, that's the 74H mounted picker, which this was the whole reason the 1600 originally showed up, was because I wanted a 1600 narrow front gas. Well, actually, I would have taken a 1600, a 1650, or a 1655, and the 1600 just so happened to be what popped up at an auction. But I wanted a narrow front gas so that I could hang the picker on it, and because it's a gas, I wouldn't be so bad about hanging a picker on it and leaving on it. But got the 1600 home and started using it, and it's such a handy tractor, and now it's got a wide front and a loader on it, and you ain't gonna put a picker on it. So I'd like to find an 880 diesel narrow front to hang this on. That would be sweet, because a 3-digit is the only series of tractor that we don't have somehow, and I just want an 880 diesel. So one of these days we'll have a tractor to hang that on someday. But it's a wide row picker, and I don't plant narrow rows anymore, so even if I had a tractor to hang it on, I can't use it other than to possibly take it to Rand Tool. So anyhow, that's everything that's over here at this barn. So we'll have to go back to the house to do the rest of it. Okay. Well, the next thing is the 73H picker, which I actually have picked with, and I got 2 videos of picking with there. That was a long time ago. Actually, the very first video I ever made was picking corn with this in my 66. Way back, 7 years ago, I think. So basically, this whole thing came to be, again, I wasn't even looking for a corn picker, but I had been, this is another one of them things where it'd been sitting in a fence row for years, and I always remember driving past it when I was a kid. And the old man that lived at the place passed away, and his wife was selling everything off. And one of the guys Dad used to work with lived right down the road from him. And he stopped over one day and said, or actually I think he told Dad when they were at work that they were selling stuff. And they were getting rid of this Oliver picker. Which the only things he had that were Oliver related was he had this picker and a 285. Yeah, a 285 white with a cab. And the tractor actually got bought. It stayed fairly local. At least I think it stayed. I think it's still around. One of Dad's old friends from high school bought it. And he farmed with it for a couple years. And I think he decided farming wasn't his thing. So I don't know if he still got it or not. But regardless, I ended up with a picker. After found out they wanted to get rid of it, we went over, or actually I went over and talked to the lady. And I kind of got screwed because she had had Dennis Polk come over and appraise everything. And I don't know how many of you have had dealings with Dennis Polk, but he's kind of crooked on shit like that because he'll appraise it high so that he can come in and buy it and just not have anybody else screw with it. And he's done, I've seen him do some shady shit at his auctions too. Regardless, you got to be careful with Dennis Polk. Anyway, he told him that it'd be worth about $500, which if it was a nice pristine shed kept 73H, they'll bring like $1,000-1,200 all day long. A decent one is like between $500 and $800 depending on location. This one was pretty rough. It had been, like I say, it had been sitting outside underneath or in a fence row for as long as I can remember, and it's picked a lot of corn in its day. The elevator is really rough. The husking bed's seen better days. The husking rolls are wore out. At least the rubber rolls, you can see they got grooves and stuff wore in them. The husking rolls are shot. The gearbox has leaked like a sieve. The pan in the bottom of the elevator was gone. There was no bottom left in it. The PTO was froze solid. It wouldn't telescope or nothing. Seems like, nah, the snouts had already been fixed. I didn't have to do anything to the snouts, although they're still rough. The center one's messed up. There's still, if I was gonna take it out and actually cover some acres with it, there's a lot more that I'd do to it. But basically, I did enough to make it run and work and pick. And I mean, it doesn't pick that bad. Although the snapping rolls they're shot. Somebody's already been in with some hard surface rod and tried to build them back up, but the husking roll or the snapping rolls are junk. They're done. Well, if you were going to use this thing to pick corn every single year and rely on it, they're done. For a toy, they're fine. But yeah, basically I ended up giving her $500 for it. And we, again, me and my buddies somehow always get drug into adventures like this. Took the 1955 over there to get it because I didn't trust pulling it home with a pickup. And it's a good thing I did because got, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles down the road, because it was by tractor. It was about a 45-minute drive to get there. Got about 4 or 5 miles down the road, coming through a hollow, and this tire, was it this one? Now, yeah, it was that one. Yeah, it was this one. This tire blew. And luckily, right at the top of the hill was a guy who I went to school with his daughter, and I knew him. And he was out in his barn taking care of cattle chores, and he came out and waved us into the driveway. And he brought a skid steer out, picked the back of it up, got the tire off, went over to my buddy's dad's place, got a tire off of a gravity wagon, because he's got some gravity wagons that run 920s. Put that on here. Got almost home. We were only about a mile, yeah, probably about a mile from my buddy's dad's farm. And I was on the tractor and I kept hearing it tss, 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 tss. Walked back around, or stopped and came back around. Well, that gravity wagon tire, we had to put it on backwards because of the way the dish was, and we didn't see that it had a semi tube in it with the long valve stem, and it had been coming around and whacking the axle tube, and it had ripped the valve stem off and was slowly leaking air. So what we ended up having to do was jack the whole thing back up. This tire was actually on that side. We took the tire from that side, put it over here, took another gravity wagon tire and put it over there because it would fit better and clear everything, and then had to pull it the rest of the way home. And then I ended up, that's actually one of the old drive tires off of my grain truck that I put on there after I bought my grain truck. So, actually, take that back, it wasn't either. We didn't put another gravity wagon tire. We took one of the steer tires off of his dad's 1460, because it had a big fat 3-rib on it in that video, or that first video I made of picking corn. That's what that was. So that was the adventure with this thing. It's same deal as the mounted picker. I don't plant wide rows anymore, so I can't really use it as much as I'd like to, because picking corn, that was fun. I don't think it would probably be very fun if you were in a wet spring and picking corn was the only form of harvest you had. It would probably be a miserable son of a bitch. But if you're just doing a few acres of it to have a good time, picking corn is probably one of the funnest things you will ever do in your life. I swear to God, I love picking corn. And one of these days I'm going to do it again. It'd be cool to get that and my mounted picker going. So, the last piece of harvest tech we got around here is the one that everybody's been waiting on. And we'll hopefully start working on it here in a couple weeks. That's a big feather. I don't know what that's off of. Anyhow, the 8700, actually just this morning I took in the radiator, the oil cooler, or the new radiator, oil cooler, and AC condenser to a radiator shop to have them cleaned and boiled and pressure checked to make sure that they're worth putting on. And once I get those back, I need to get a battery for it, because the one that's in it's about dead and it won't crank it over again, and I'm not going to deal with a dead battery. So get a battery in it and I can start working on the thing. I would not expect to be seeing this ready for harvest this fall, because I got a feeling I'm going to be opening a can of worms. But I am going to get at least the radiator and all that, get the hood straightened out, get the railing straightened out. I'm going to get all that stuff straightened out, get it to where it'll actually run and drive and move so that I can get it inside, because I really don't like this thing sitting outside like this, but it is what it is. And this thing has its own video, so go back and watch that if you really want to know that much about it. But short story is, last year at Rantoul, was talking to Jake. He told me he knew a guy that wanted to get rid of an 8700 for free. The catch was it had been rolled over. Well, I'd never been one to be scared of a project, so last winter I went out and looked at it, told the guy I'd take it, got it hauled back by one of my viewers earlier this spring, and the rest will be history. It came out of Dietering Bros in Bancroft, Iowa originally. That's not where I got it from. It stayed in Iowa forever. Now it's in Michigan. So, like I say, that hopefully probably won't be next weekend because I got stuff planned. Hopefully the weekend after I'm going to start working on this. So, yeah. Like I say, you want more on that, it's got its own video. Like, it was the only combine that had its own video, so I figured I probably ought to do the rest because they were kind of left out. So anyhow, that's kind of the harvest crew we got around here as far as equipment goes. So I guess that does it for this one. We'll catch y'all on the